Right, we're here today with Gary Miller, who is the parliamentary candidate for the Green Party. And today's interviewing panel is Ashley and Stephen. And without any further ado, I shall let Ashley commence with the very first question.
The first question is about housing.
Can we ever make housing generally affordable for local people?
Very good question. The problem with housing as I see it is that there isn't enough supply at the right end of the market, and this problem has been manufactured by previous governments selling off council houses, which was the socially rented houses, and the rental market is the sort of the competition for the homeowner market. If there are plenty of rental properties available, then there's not such a demand for people buying a house and the prices will drop. At the moment we're in the situation where there aren't enough houses for rent, or people cannot afford the rent because rents are too high because they're not regulated properly, and so there's a scramble to get at the houses that are available. And because of that, in this free market economy we have, the prices of those houses has gone sky high, to the point where first time buyers can't really afford them. But banks are lending more and more money. So we need to be a bit more realistic about what the banks are doing, because it's just letting people get more into debt. So we need to reform the rental market and build more social housing. Not build more houses to sell off, because people that have the spare cash will just buy them and then rent them out and become landlords. We need to create many more rental properties to provide a competition for the homeowner market. And that will mean that the people have a choice to rent or to buy, and there won't be such a squeeze on the housing market, and the prices should drop then.
Okay. Second question, still on housing. There appears to be a disparity in the way repairs and maintenance are handled in relation to council housing, favouriting those that don't look after their properties over those who do. What could be done to rectify this?
Maintenance on rental houses. Well, I know there is an issue that if you build a new house, you don't pay any VAT on that. But if you maintain a property, everything you buy to maintain it, you pay 20% VAT on. So that doesn't seem fair. You're sort of being penalised there for looking after your own property. You know, if you demolished it and built it all over again, you wouldn't pay VAT on it. So that seems a strange thing that doesn't add up to me. But the disparity with the maintenance, there is a problem where some people think if I live in a terrible house, the council will have to rehome me. So they don't report problems with their houses. And sometimes their relationships with their landlords aren't great for a variety of reasons, but they don't report the problems, or they make the problems worse deliberately, and then they phone the council up and say, you need to rehome me. But the problem is, of course, is that there isn't a supply of council houses anymore. And some people think there are hundreds and thousands of council houses just waiting for a vacancy, but that doesn't happen anymore because so many of them have been sold off. But there is a perception that if you smash your house up, they'll give you a better one. So I think that a lot of that, perhaps it's word of mouth, but some people still believe that. So they don't look after places thinking that eventually they'll get a better one, or that they'll get points, and the more points they get for this broken, that broken, this not working, the more chance they'll get of a council house. But there just aren't any council houses up for grabs nowadays, very few.
Okay. The next one is on education.
We are all looking to go to university. What is your personal opinion on tuition fees?
Personally, scrap them. I think it's a daft idea. We didn't used to have them. We got by perfectly well without tuition fees. You had grants to cover your expenses for living away from home, and students still had part-time jobs. That was fine, but it's a ridiculous amount of money, and £9,000, and it builds up and builds up. You can come out of university with 40. I think the average is something like 45,000 pounds debt. And that isn't everybody. Some people can do it a lot less, and some people it's a lot worse. But that debt can cause people to drop out altogether. It's completely counterproductive. A lot of people, when they come out of university with those debts, then find themselves opting for jobs that are low paid to keep themselves below the threshold where they have to start paying the loan back. So the university education that should have gotten a good job at the end of it hasn't done it, hasn't achieved what they've set out to, because they want to avoid paying it off for as long as possible. And if a lot of people aren't paying it off, then the system isn't working. And the country will be out of pocket because we've paid the universities for the education and the state isn't getting the money back because people aren't making the repayments. So I would scrap tuition fees and fund the universities by the state.
The next question, still on education. We have seen a significant growth in our population over recent years, and with local school places in such high demand. What could be done to alleviate the situation?
Well, the state has an obligation to educate children, so it has to provide the places for them. And that means school building, either increasing the number of classes at a school or building whole new schools. You know, if we are increasing the size of our towns, then we need to consider building new schools or larger schools to take up the spare capacity. Now the government knows how many children are coming on stream because obviously they have the births and deaths and marriages. They have all the statistics on that. So then it should be possible to plan ahead. You know how many school children are going to come up. You know, in the 60s there was the baby boom, but even nowadays, all births are registered. So a local authority will know that in 5 years' time, X number of pupils will be starting school, and at different ages. They're aware of that. So it's about allocating resources. And sadly, I don't think there is the will to fund the education system enough to supply all these places that are required. Schooling is a long-term thing, and I've seen small village schools shut down because the pupil numbers have dwindled, and then a few years later they've gone up again, babies have got to the school age and suddenly there's no place for them. You need a long-term plan so that schools are kept open to be able to take up new pupils when the fluctuating population gets to the right level. It's all about cash, unfortunately, and I don't see the current government giving that sort of thing enough of a priority. We're all being squeezed.
The next question is on transport.
What measures might be put in place to deal with the rising numbers of potholes, hazardous footpaths, air quality and noise pollution generated by traffic?
Air pollution, that is technology. We improve our cars so that they pollute less. The government can help that by providing incentives by adjusting the vehicle excise duty, which they have done. You know, if you have an electric vehicle or a vehicle that doesn't put out a lot of CO2, then your road tax is a lot lower. So it's quite possible to adjust that and to have a steeper escalation to encourage people to buy more fuel efficient vehicles, or the vehicles that don't pollute. I know there are 2 new air quality management areas around Sittingbourne that have just appeared in the last couple of years. There's been one in Faversham, and it's actually getting worse because nothing is done to do it, nothing is done to fix it. So I am worried about that because there do seem to be more trucks and more cars on the road, and people are travelling further to take their children to school, for example. So the school run is a massive amount of cars on the road all at the same time every single day, and it clogs up the roads, and then you find there's a lot of air pollution. So I'd like to see parents having the confidence in their schools that they're all good, so that they can take their child to the nearest school rather than having to put them in a car and take them from one side of the town to the other, or even to the next town. So I think by just stopping people or making it easier for people to use facilities that are closer to them, then they won't have to be on the road so much. So could you say the question again, please?
Yeah.
Because it's in sort of 3 parts.
Do you want me to
just read the whole
say
thing, will be
whole
fine.
thing, yeah. What measures might be put in place to deal with the rising numbers of potholes, hazardous footpaths, air quality and noise pollution generated by traffic?
Potholes is a bit of a bugbear of mine. Everybody should report them, so that there's no excuse, because due to cuts, Kent County Council don't have, like they used to, they don't send cars around monitoring the road surface. And when they did do that, it was only on the main road. So the side streets become neglected and they fill up with potholes. I reported one outside the Form Centre in Sittingbourne, and it was about this wide, and I stood in it, and it was about 2.5 inches deep, I would say. And it was on the entrance to the Form Centre, and I thought, how many hundreds of cars will have driven over this? And it's 5 minutes walk away from the town council offices. And I think people need to report them, but obviously there is the thought that this isn't my job, I pay my taxes, the council should be fixing this is their job, but the resources have been cut, and now it's up to us, unfortunately, to do the work that used to be paid for and report them. So fixmystreet.com, you can do that, or the Kent County Council website has things for reporting potholes, but it all boils down to resources. Money has been cut, and there's not much left over. So we have to kick up a fuss and make a report in order to get anything done. It's no good just driving over it and thinking somebody ought to do something. You have to take personal action.
Okay. The next question is still on transport. With renewed commitment to upgrade Stockby Roundabout and lacklustre support from Kent Highways to pursue the completion of the Northern Relief Road, should this remain a Swale Council priority, and if so, what benefits will it bring exactly?
I'm not greatly familiar with that development, but what I would say is that I would prefer if both developments went ahead, as in the Ring Road was finished, the Relief Road was finished, as well as the Stockbury roundabout being upgraded, because that way you have 2 points of entry. So if there's a problem or an accident that affects one, then you have a second option. Always good to have more than one option in any case. This shows the sort of problem that happens when a council or Kent County Council, the highway people, don't have a long-term plan. Because roads are around for a long time. You can't just think 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead. You've got to think well into the future. As to whether it should be a priority for Swale Borough Council, I don't think it should be a top priority, because I think it's going to take an awful lot of debate and talks and meetings to get anywhere on it. Roads are always slow, but I think if Kent County Council, the Highways Agency, are sincere about improving Stockby roundabout, when work starts on that, at the very least, that would be an incentive. At the moment, it's just a little bit of talk, well, shall we or shan't we? As soon as work starts on Stockby, I think that will give the impetus to get the Relief Road improved as well. That's what I'd like to see. And then I think it won't be such a problem for Swale Borough Council.
What can be done to improve public transport, given that local bus services are being cut?
Bit of a vicious circle with local buses. The bus companies are there to make a profit, and they will withdraw services that aren't used enough, and obviously, or they will cut the number of runs throughout the day. The service isn't used enough, which means people can't use it, which means it dwindles. So I would like to see more council intervention in the running of local public services, so that they commission them and that they require, for example, a minimum period, say at least 6 months, for a service to be operating before it's evaluated as being viable. Otherwise the plug can be pulled too quickly, a new service can be introduced, and it's not running often enough for word to get out and for people to realise that it's a viable alternative. So a bus service has to be regular, and it has to take people from where they are to where they want to be. And they have to know about it, because I've heard about services on the island that have dwindled because they haven't been publicised. They've been running for a few months, but they weren't advertised in the local papers or on notice boards, and the residents that could have taken advantage of it didn't even know about it. So I think the buses need There needs some stability. When the services are introduced, they need to be given a good run, at least 6 months, to establish themselves. They need to be advertised everywhere, local newspapers, local radio, online council websites, through the parish organisations, so that people get to hear about them. Because obviously a bus that's full of, even if it's half full and it's carrying 30 people, that's a lot better than 5 or 6 cars on the road.
Okay. The next question is on economy. What might you be able to do to support local businesses?
It's Green Party policy to have a review of business rates. We think they're too high currently, and the local businesses can't often afford them. So what happens is a small business will start up, will open a store, and it's fairly common for there to be a 3 or 6 month introductory period where they're on reduced rates, and that's their chance to get going. It's an incentive that works very well. But at the end of that 6 months, when the full rent kicks in, the business may find that they're struggling to pay their business rates. So we'd like to see those rates reduced down. I've seen it quite a few times, newspaper stories which turn it on its head and say, council have doubled my rates. And it isn't, it's just that the discount period has come to an end. But I think it's the business rate model it's disproportionate. It's too high for the smaller businesses. Where I live now, there are empty shops in town, quite large ones, and the local businesses can't afford to open them up, even though there's a gap for certain trade in our town. People can't afford to open the shop up because they can't afford the rates. But an empty property doesn't make money for anybody. Any landlord isn't making money out of an empty property. So if we reduce the rates so that businesses can afford to start up, they will fill those gaps. I'm certain of it.
Okay. This one is on local facilities.
What facilities would you provide that would benefit the local community, especially younger people?
Younger people, been a while since I've been a young person. I love swimming pools. I think swimming pools should be run well and be cheap enough so that people can use them regularly. Skate parks are always popular with young people. And I know there is one in Sheerness that they're trying to get out off the ground. Well, on the ground, obviously, that's where they are, they're not up in the air. So the skate park is being planned for Sheerness, but there's the usual problem of attracting funding, and there's also one that's been mooted around here in Sittingbourne. But it's a case of getting the funds in. But I find a lot of young people, they want to hang around with their friends, so they want places that they can do it. So outside parks that have enough benches, I've got toilet blocks, facilities for people. There's no point having facilities available where you can't spend more than half an hour there because you've got to go off and find a toilet somewhere. I'd like to see cycle paths where possible, so that people can travel. Young people don't have cars, or the majority of them don't have cars. So to make cycling, skating, scooters, all that sort of thing easier, is to have either wide enough paths so that you can have shared use, pedestrians and cyclists. I know some people don't like that, but there are many places where it works perfectly well. Or dedicated cycle paths. Now we have the national cycle route, but that is often specifically designed to move people on bikes as far away as possible from the roads. Well, naturally, people have places to go, and young people want to be able to go from A to B to meet their friends, and if they want to do it safely, they want to do it in a cycle lane. So where possible, cycle lanes will be a good thing. So I'm a big fan of the outdoors, so I like sports arenas, football pitches, cricket pitches, badminton, tennis, cycle lanes, and a good old swimming pool. If we're hot enough to have a swimming pool outside, all to the good.
Okay. The next question is in general. If there is one thing you would like to achieve in Sittingbourne area during your term as our MP, what would it be?
One thing, narrow that down. Green Party policy is to oppose austerity, and what that means really is that we stop turning off the taps that control the money supply from central government, where most of our taxes goes, back down to the local area. And I would like to fight for a lot more of that money to come down to Sittingbourne, because there are plenty of things that we can do, but unfortunately money drives everything. And at the moment, the council sits down twiddling its thumbs, thinking, "Oh, we need partners. We need partners." They're always waiting for somebody else to come in and bring some money to do the work that we're expecting them to do. So whether it's new leisure facilities, the council doesn't commission anything anymore. It waits for somebody else to fill the gap. And I think that's wrong. But I would definitely be against austerity. I think we should spend in our communities for whatever our community needs, whether it's leisure facilities, whether it's lowering the business rates so that our business can start up, or of course improving wages. Green Party policies to raise the minimum wage to £7.85 from £6, whatever it is now, it's not much at all, 20% up to £7.85 and £10 an hour by 2020. If people have more money, they can spend it in their community thrives, the local businesses thrives. So it's all about opposing austerity to me. Get the money out of central government, stop spending it in the city and distribute it around the country, and specifically to Sittingbourne and Sheppey, because that's where it's needed. There are so many things you could do if we had the money, and it's been given away to the banks because people aren't a priority for the current government.
What is your favourite musical group or artist and why?
Favourite musical group? Oh, well, where do we start on that one? It'll take a while to think about this one. I'm quite fussy, so I might like a band, and then after the next album, if it's no good, I'll just go off it. I used to like a band called Ancient Bards, who I think are possibly... Oh, they're Italian. Got their first 2 albums, but the third one's not very good. Winter Sun from Finland. If you're not into heavy metal, quite heavy metal, you won't get any of these.
Oh, right. That makes sense though.
There's a new band I discovered a couple of years ago when I went to the Bloodstock Festival called Reign of Fury from Bristol. They're very good. They're sort of thrash, so Metallica would be better. My favourite, who would my favourite be? It's tricky. It used to be Dragon Force. But most people have heard of those because they've been on Guitar Hero.
Yes.
They did Through the Fire and Flames for Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like fast stuff with plenty of guitar.
Okay. Next question is still in general. Outside of politics, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Well, it's 2 things. I enjoy gardening. I like the slow pace of it. I like being outside in the sun. And I like the fact you can have a chunk of ground full of weeds and you can dig them all out, and at the end of the day you can see a difference. Because that's what I want to do in politics. I want to make a difference. It's not for me just turning up and sitting there leaving through paperwork and being told how to vote by the whip and going like that. I want to see a difference. So gardening's really good for that sort of thing. You can plant something, 3 months later something's come up and you've grown something, you've made a difference, and if you're lucky it's something nice to look at, or even better, it's something nice to eat. The other one is I do spend a fair bit of time on the internet, but what I'm doing most at the moment is playing Elite Dangerous, because I remember when the first Elite game came out in the 80s. It was on the BBC Micro, and then it was on the Acorn Electron and the ZX Spectrum, which is what I had. Fantastic computer. And now, umpteen years later, coming up to 30 years later, they've brought it out again now, and you have the whole galaxy to explore, 400 billion stars, and it's coming out on Xbox. I think the Mac's getting it as well, and you could lose hours of your life in there. But yeah, so that's what I like to do.
The last question is...
What is your favourite shop in Sittingbourne?
Favourite shop in Sittingbourne? Favourite shop in Sittingbourne? I'd have to say WH Smith, because I love books and I love magazines. And my second choice would be the library, for the same sort of reason. libraries are just fantastic. I mean, I know there are people that don't go to libraries, and I think this is crazy. There's all this amazing stuff, and it's totally free. So when I wasn't looking at magazines in W.H. Smith, I'd be in the library. I could spend an awful lot of time in the library.
Well, that concludes today. So I'd like to say thank you very much for doing this, Gary.
Thank you
Really
for inviting me.
appreciate it.